Look Outreach is underwritten by the generous support of Munter Enterprises. Family owned and operated since 1972, integrity is important, as our family name is on every project. Our word is our bond. Munter Enterprises. Just build it.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, we already know we live in a complicated world, and if the event happened in Las Vegas recently, just leads many of us to conclude that not only is it a complicated world that we live in, but where is the intersection between mental illness and everyday living and families and the like. And joining me today is actually a very good friend of mine, Stephen Madarasz. I've known for a number of years, and coincidentally, we had arranged to do this interview before that. Steve is a board president for the Mental Health Foundation. So first, Steve, welcome. Very nice to have you here.
Thank you.
This world we live in, this very complicated world we live in, some statistics are kind of stunning to me. 1 in 5 people suffer from some form of mental illness in this country. That's 1 out of 5 people. That number is really, really high. And you tend to think a lot of times, Steve, that someone suffers from mental illness, that they're the aggressor, that they're the one that's causing these kind of situations that happen in a Las Vegas and things like that. And in reality, this intersection between mental health and criminal justice and acts of violence, and it's not nearly that easily clarified,
it's complex. There's no doubt about that. The likelihood of somebody with a mental illness committing a crime is far less than the likelihood that somebody with mental illness will be the victim of a crime. Yet we don't see that. And incidents like what happened in Las Vegas certainly contribute to the stigma associated with mental health. You know, people will very loosely use terms like crazy or nuts or insane, whack jobs, that kind of thing. We all do this, sometimes without thinking, and we don't really consider what that might actually mean when there are people who are suffering. Sometimes they're suffering in silence, sometimes it's more overt, but every one of us has mental health challenges. There's no question about that. I mean, even things like situational depression, we all have circumstances that can affect us. But there are many folks who do suffer from serious and persistent mental illness, and we need to do a much better job not only of trying to encourage them to seek the help that they need, and again, that's one of the challenges when stigma is associated with behavioral health issues, that people may be reluctant to go and get the help they need, and if they do, they're far more likely to be able to move towards recovery more quickly. So we do need to encourage folks to get that help, but we also need to have systems and policies that encourage it.
You know what? I think I'm going to cycle back on something here. That when you talk about mental illness, I think a lot of times people don't recognize that the word illness is very important there. We recognize cancer, right?
Sure.
Right? You can recognize that form of illness is something where you can say, okay, we're trying to find a cure for it. But there are actually cures for mental illness like there are for anything else. But because of that stigma, there's an enormous divide between identifying it, realizing it, and acting on it.
That's exactly right. Mental illness does not discriminate. It affects people at all socioeconomic ranges, gender, ethnicity, what have you. In fact, some ethnicities are even more prone to it than others. But the reality is that everybody can confront this challenge, and so we do, as you say, look at things like cancer, heart disease. Nobody chooses to get those diseases, and it's really the same with mental health challenges. No one chooses to be ill.
Now, given the nature of mental illness, there's always an intersection, it seems, between the person that might be suffering from an illness and the criminal justice system.
Right.
And there seems to me to be it's very fragmented, or it seems to be a real disconnect on how that person is treated in that kind of situation?
Oh, there's no question. Even when you just look here in the capital region or across New York, we have a very fragmented system of providing help for people who have mental health challenges. The Mental Health Foundation is involved in a national conference, and this is really a problem for almost every community in the country. We are seeing their jails being overcrowded with people with mental illness who do not belong in those jails. Most of those folks have been arrested for nuisance crimes or because the local officials don't know what else to do with them because there aren't treatment programs available. That's what I was saying earlier, that we really need to do a better job of coordinating the services, having all of the various stakeholders in communities speak to one another, have a greater understanding, implement plans that will ensure that people can get diverted from the jails and hospital emergency rooms where they're, causing some serious difficulties and at great cost as well, I should say, and into care that's going to be, far more integrated and help them to lead better lives. It's better for the individual and it contributes to a stronger community.
I'm thinking of intervention. And I'm thinking, if someone suffers from a drug problem, for instance, peer-to-peer intervention seems to be very effective in that. Do you find in this situation that that's also effective?
Well, there's no question that peer-to-peer programs have demonstrated an ability to be effective. The idea of a peer-to-peer is that the individual has an opportunity to interact with somebody who may be experiencing something very similar. And so I think that, kind of almost in a common sense way would give you an understanding of how that works. The Mental Health Foundation, as I said, is working on a national conference in Miami in December. And the reason we're going to be in Miami is because that is a community that has made some tremendous strides in terms of bringing people together. So we'll be showcasing a lot of the best practices that they're employing, as well as best practices from across the country. And what we find is that getting people to the table, having these conversations creates better understanding and then can lead to those better policies. So when you talk about things like the peer-to-peer, there are very often ways that you can de-escalate situations involving individuals with mental illness if you involve peers. And so that might mean having folks in the advocacy community working more closely with the law enforcement community to ensure that that happens.
Steve, I know you, on a personal level. Steve is so passionate about this, as you can probably tell. Look, there's a couple of things I want to conclude with. A lot of us would know somebody that if they start to behave erratically, something is wrong. You might feel it yourself. The most important thing to do is recognize that it's not a stigma, that it is something that needs to be addressed. So there are things like intervention. It could be personal intervention. If you need professional intervention, you can do that as well. And then the other thing is that if you're in law enforcement, if you're in healthcare, if you're a government official, this intersection of the other organizations that impact what we're discussing here today, you should go to Miami. You should go to this convention. There will be representatives from the Capital District there. There'll be representatives from all over the country there, offering advice, seminars, workshops on how, on a local level, those organizations can work together better to help
Exactly.
individuals.
In fact, we're working with another group here in the Capital Region, the Institute for Behavioral Healthcare Improvement, and they are specifically focused on using evidence-based practices to produce better results. The whole idea of what they are focused on is that we already know a lot of things that will work. It's just that we're not using them as effectively as we might. So I think that that's exactly what we're trying to do in Miami, is get the right people together, showcase the best examples across the country where communities are making a difference, and then start moving forward. I think we hope that out of this Miami conference, there will be a lot of folks here in New York who are attending, and that we'll be able to build some critical mass in that direction as well.
Well, you know what? I hope we're raising a lot of important issues that you might recognize and ones that you think that you can contribute. Go to mentalhealthfoundation.net. mentalhealthfoundation.net is an enormous amount of information there that you might be able to use personally or use professionally. And Steve, thank you. This world that we're living in is not going to get any less complicated, and unless we start to address situations like this, then I don't know about the future, you know.
Well, I think there's actually a very positive message for the future, and that is that particularly on mental health issues, recovery is possible, and people
Yes,
need to
that's important
understand
to
that.
understand,
It is
yeah.
about early intervention. It is about having a support system in place. It is about people understanding the issue more fully. But you know, nobody should lose that hope. There really is recovery possible.
Yeah, you're right. Steve, thank you very much for coming in and taking the time
Thank
to
you.
do this. Nice to see you. To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.